Welcome to Alchemy Uncensored, a podcast presented by Alchemy Search, a team of professional financial and tax recruiters. Our podcast is dedicated to providing valuable insights into the financial and tax sector of the UAE by discussing the challenges and opportunities faced by employers and job seekers. Alchemy Uncensored is the perfect podcast for those looking to gain a competitive edge in the finance, accounting and tax industry of the UAE. Stay informed on the latest job market trends, developments and conversations to stay ahead of the game. Tune into our podcast to be part of this insightful conversation.
I'm Lewis Elsie, the specialist accountancy and finance recruiter at Alchemy Search. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Darell Edon. Darell is the CFO for PJP Investment Group. PJP is the master franchisee for Papa John's in the UAE, KSA and Jordan, with 110 trading restaurants. Next year, we'll see further expansion with the opening of Iraq and 650 locations in India over a 10-year period. Originally from Leeds in the UK, Darell is ACMA qualified and has worked across consumer, retail and F&B with companies such as Scottish & Newcastle, Monsoon and Manor Bakeries. Darell is a commercially focused CFO who believes finance should not be known as bean counters, but business partners and advisors to drive profitability and better understanding of the business. So Darell, thanks for coming. This will be my first Alchemy podcast, but this is one of many that we've done so far. So looking forward to this one. How has your summer been? Have you managed to escape Dubai? Or?
No, we didn't escape. Unfortunately, we was moving house. We got the dreaded landlord notice. So I spent the time of the summer moving house, and my wife started a new job, so she's a teacher, so she was back in early August as well. So we just had a chill time, unpacking and sorting out things in the new house and stuff. So yeah, it's been relaxing, but time to find some work now.
Rumour, a lot of time spent on the golf course.
Allegedly spent on a lot of golf course. Yes.
I want to apologise on behalf of my colleague Jeff, who I think you told him how to play golf at the weekend. Can you confirm that was the case? How did you get on?
Yeah, I mean, so myself and Connor played against Jeff and a guy from Virtuzone. Yeah, and we won quite easily in the end. I think we let them think they were getting back into it with about a couple of holes to go. But I just sunk a 20-foot putt over 3 different hills on the last to secure it for us.
Fine. So rumour, Jeff was nowhere to be seen after the match, I've heard. So
I believe he was organising games night. That was his excuse, and he had to leave quickly.
Yeah, okay. Well, he hasn't stopped going on about it in the office, so I think he wants a rematch at some point soon. But anyway, thank you for coming. I think it'd be useful to start, obviously being a recruiter, a lot of people want to move to the UAE and Saudi as well. You've been here 10 years in the Middle East, just over. So I think it'd be useful to really start just to understand how you made your move here, what that journey looked like, because 10 years ago may be quite different, but I think it'd be useful for the listeners just to hear that journey, how you did move to the Middle East.
No, I'd been in the UK and obviously done all my SEMA qualifying across different companies. I've always been someone who stayed quite a long time in companies. So with Scottish Newcastle, I worked across 5 or 6 different roles, from a management accountant to senior roles within Scottish Newcastle, from a regional office to a small business unit to the head office. So gained quite a good exposure across all elements over 6 or 7 years there. Same when I was in Manor Bakeries, they were just different roles, so got that exposure across different expertise areas. So whether that was in the commercial side, whether that was in the operational side, in the logistics side as well, just to try and get that rounded experience. And moving to Monsoon sort of got me my first real international exposure. Obviously, it was a UK-based brand with, at the time, it had half a dozen subsidiaries and about 50 or 60 franchise partners across the world. So being that exposure of seeing that international business, going out and visiting them, doing audits and things like that for them, was something really interesting. And, as me and my wife, we got together, we always said she'd worked abroad, pre-student and post-student in different places, and I think she always wanted to carry on going. And I sort of got the bug as well. I wouldn't say Saudi was top of my list of those places in the first place, but the role came up, and Allocair are one of the biggest organisations in Saudi, in Riyadh. At the time, they had something like 85 fashion retail brands across around 18 different countries. To go in and set up their whole forecasting, planning and commercial section was something really, really interesting. They were on a huge journey at the time as well to grow and get to $1 billion Real EBITDA targets over a 5-year period. And it was just something that, when I met with the team from Allocair, came over to London, they hired out Soho Hotel, and for a couple of days they were doing back-to-back interviews. I liked what I saw. Me and my wife discussed it and thought, look, we'll try it for a couple of years. And I think that's what, if you speak to many expats who I've known here, they say they've come for 2 years or you've come for 3 years. And then you just get the bug, and there's something that, from a living style, from the working, from an exposure perspective. If I look back, the exposure I had when I was in Allocair, if I'd have been in a similar size organisation in London, for example, they have a function that does everything, and you get a little bit pigeonholed sometimes, where I think here there's a little bit more of an open category where people get involved in more things than what they say their job description does, for want of a better thing. And that's where I got involved in M&A several times, which is something I know in the UK I'd never have had the chance to do. So I actually added more and more value to what I was doing and learning within that time. Obviously, Saudi's was difficult, especially back in 2012. Things were just starting to change. And now, obviously, it's a lot different even now, and I still go back quite regularly with the restaurants we have with Papa John's and with my previous place. And you can see the changes, how the country is evolving, how it wants to incite people to come and work in that country, and the people you meet and the people you get involved with are so nice to work with, and they the pleasure, they feel honoured that you're coming to their country, if you like, and working. And I loved the time I was there. We did 3 years, and it was time to move on.
Was UAE always on the cards, or was it see how Saudi goes and then go from there?
It was see how Saudi goes, and as I said, we did go with a plan of 2 years. 12 years ago, we put our house in storage, and we've been paying for those bits of storage for the last 12 years.
Monthly storage fees coming through for 12 years.
So it's just, I think we both, me and my wife, lived it, going out into the desert, doing different things that you didn't get a chance to do when we sat in London. I've always got this picture of, on one Christmas, we went camping in the desert, and there was a group, it was called the Hash Harriers, and they used to go walking in the desert, basically, or some people would run up and down the hills and stuff. And I always remember just had this barbecue, they had a dance floor, and it was a Christmas time party. I think it was just sit back and just thinking of that sunset and everything. It was just a great experience. But
it's surreal compared to the traditional UK Christmas of sitting around the TV.
And being out and seeing stuff, and it was something I really, really enjoyed. And when we decided that it was time to move on from Saudi, it was a case of anywhere but going back to the UK. So I was looking whether it was here, whether it was in Far East, Caribbean, and that we'd sort of got the expat bug.
Yeah. And now, how did you make that move? How did you get that next role? How easy was that? Because 10 years ago, I'm assuming it was a bit easier than now, but it'd be interesting to hear how that came about.
I was quite lucky at the time. It was through a recruitment guy who was based here in Dubai. The company was going through effectively a startup, but was also listed on the stock market here, and it was a F&B and retail. So something I'd done in Allocair. They were looking at big expansions through mergers and acquisitions. So again, something that I ticked off on my CV that was there. And it was a great opportunity to come into a new organisation, help again to set it up and get going. I think it's one of the things I actually love doing, is that problem solving and setting up and getting things working. it was just a great challenge to come see how I could do it, and watch a business grow from half a dozen stores to whatever the target would be for that.
Yeah, and then did you move from there to where you are now?
I did. I had a couple of role in between with Gourmet Gulf, who's again another F&B place. So Gourmet Gulf was my first sort of 100% F&B business, where I'd done mixture of F&B and retail in the sort of previous 2 or 3 roles. This was my first pure F&B. It was in the casual dining sector, so a little bit different. With a great team, again, going through a bit of an expansion and growth, some great brands to work, and it was a great team, and I actually learned a lot, particularly from a food perspective from my CEO at the time, who was really keen that everybody understood the recipes, understood how the food should taste, how the food should look, and if you was to go with your family or friends, that if there's something wrong, that you're approaching and discussing this with the teams, and it's something that from there I've always taken forward into my current role as well.
I think one thing that is quite interesting, and one of the things that I noticed having moved and recruited in this market, is a lot of the hiring is often one of the requirements is industry experience, and that's something that, having engaged with you before, you was quite open to some similar industries. You wasn't almost tunnel visioned into you must come into X industry. What do you think about that, and how has that hindered or helped you with your hiring?
Even from a personal perspective, I've struggled in the past because you get pigeonholed as someone in retail. So my last role in the UK was retail. My last role in Saudi was 90% retail, 10% F&B, and so for some reason, senior people, you've got to have that experience in that role. Now, yes, it can add value at certain levels, but if you're operation or a marketing function, maybe yes. But from a finance bit, especially in a commercial element, numbers are numbers, if you like. And it was a candidate I was interviewing who recently, and said whether it's a perfume or a pizza, the thought process of how you'd cost something, how you'd analyse something is very, very similar. And that's what I've been trying to look for when I've been recruiting, is do they have that vision to see and understand? Some people can grasp it, some can't. So can you understand, can they grasp a change of industry and take it down to that granular level in a different way?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest frustrations that I think candidates experience. And I don't know if there's a solution to it as such, because I think it's very dependent on the hiring manager at the time and their expectations or the way they see things. But having seen examples of where if you do change the industry slightly, it's, as a recruiter, I can now have an example or a case study and say, well, I actually worked with X person who actually did consider other industries. They wasn't tunnel visioned into just the industry as such, and they hired someone, and this is the benefit. Because I think that's the challenge. It's so easy just to say, I'm a construction company, I'm going to recruit someone from construction, but that is definitely one of the biggest bugbearers of people in this part of the world.
I agree, and I think for me, across having personally worked across consumer, across retail, and because of F&B over my time, I see the similarities. Particularly from a finance perspective. I carry on the pharma and the tech industries and the construction side, but bringing someone in who's got that little bit of different thought process actually sometimes adds a significant amount of value, because they can maybe look at something in a different way to that you're not normally used to thinking about, and that's the challenge that I like to put into my team. As well.
And that's one bit of advice I do give to candidates that are sometimes struggling. I say to them, realistically, if you've worked in fintech, in majority of cases, you're not going to get a job in construction.
No.
Right? But are there any industries which are similar, or are there industries where the business model is the same? For example, how they account for the revenue or whatever. And is that a way you can maybe expand your options rather than just ending up in one industry for your whole career, which can obviously be a frustration. I mean, when we first met, something that really kind of struck a chord with me, and I think being in the UK, comparing the UK finance market and how finance works in the UK, and having you've been there yourself, was the evolution of the finance function. And we alluded to it in the intro. It's not about being a bean counter anymore, and that's something you're a big believer in. So it'd be good just to hear a bit about that.
It's something I've always believed, and even something I go back to my time in the UK, where coming from the UK to the Middle East, in a way, you took a little bit a step back in time in terms of what was happening from a technology perspective, what was happening from how processes were done, that everything was paid on a bank transfer rather than you physically having to write out, 20 checks for a 3 or 4 year lease contract and things like that. And for me, it's about how do you make finance more interesting? How do you make the role that people want to do utilize better? The tools and the technology out there at the moment is unbelievable, and it makes our lives easier, and it helps us to make decisions. I think, since COVID, everything, and even leading that point up to COVID and then it happening, you had to learn to adapt quickly. And if you couldn't adapt, you didn't know if you could make your next payroll run for the teams who were there. You didn't know if you could pay your next rent checks. So having to make sure you can use those tools to really plan, think, and use them to an advantage rather than just being there is something that I want to continue to push into my team at the moment.
Yeah, what examples have you got? I remember when we met prior to this, you gave some examples about the value that using data and the tools and efficiencies can bring, and not necessarily adding lots of headcount, maybe not great for those in recruitment, but generally, what are you seeing, like real life examples and value add that people can...
So we've worked through 2 or 3 major projects ongoing at the moment, the first being RPA. So the process is, for us being an F&B business, our key thing is cash. Whether that's cash that comes from an aggregator like Talabat, or someone who walks into one of our stores and pays cash or with a card. So you're getting multiple different sources, and especially here with the aggregators, you've got 15, 20, 25 different places where you're trying to get the cash and reconcile that in. And we have in the team now, we have someone who does that manually through an Excel. So they'll download the bank statement, they'll download the statement from the POS provider, and they'll download the POS system and match the two up and spend a lot of time. What value does that add? Because normally 80-90% of those transactions normally match simply, but it's the 5-10% where then they're not having the time to really understand and investigate. Where using something like an RPA, it's doing all that bit, and you're just left with the 5 or 10%. So then they can really spend time and understand why and how things could be happening, and making sure that it's not missed, and how you get that cash back in is one way we're doing. We've moved from a forecasting process as well. Forecasting is something and budgeting is something I've been really keen and close to a lot of my career in terms of developing tools and improving that, whether that was through Cognos back in the UK and different tools here. So now we was using Excel, and that was great when we had one country with 30, 40 stores. But now we're 3 countries with 110 stores. When you're trying to forecast 50, 60, 70 different expense lines and monthly sales, whether they're through an aggregator and through a dine-in, delivery or takeaway, that Excel spreadsheet is now just impossible to manage. Version control becomes impossible. You can't, how many times have you opened an Excel sheet and it just goes, sorry, there's an error, and you've lost everything. By putting this into our forecasting system, it's there, it's done. It gives you the ability to do some what-if scenarios. So obviously, going into board meetings or budget reviews, you've got to know what's going to happen if the board come back and go, actually, we need 5% more in top line. But to do that in an Excel, to go through every store, add 5% and do that, it takes a long time. Where the tools we've developed, you hit the full year number and it adds 5% to it in 5 minutes, and you see, and everything else is recalculated based on that. So that has helped us then to be more vigilant of, right, we're sort of scenario planning of best case, worst case, what would happen, what do we need in terms of extra cash, this to plan our openings based on these 2 or 3 best case, worst case scenarios.
Yeah, it's quite refreshing to hear that approach. But I'd definitely be interested to see over the coming years if every business maybe adopts that approach and becomes more mature, because I get inundated, for example, with candidates in the UK who are in like FP&A roles, and I think the difficulty that they have is how many FP&A roles are there in this part of the world. Everyone wants to either work in FP&A or come out, or what we see often is people in audit who want to go into FP&A, or someone who's in FP&A, but the challenge is there's not that many roles out there, and I don't know if that's going to change, because I think certain industries and certain companies still adopt that maybe bean counter mentality, and finance is just back office. Like, is that going to change, do you think? Because you've been here longer than me, but
I think it is changing. I think it's slowly changing. That people now are seeing that different, that finance teams can add value through the analysis, through understanding of what's going on. People are, the teams and, some of the family-owned businesses, which have grown massive out here, they need that support now. You can't run the business in the Middle East without looking at what's going on. The Middle East is, it's quite a volatile business. It changes, things happen, come and go. You have a lot of transiency with people coming and going. It's just the nature of this part of the world, I think, and being an expat. So how do you control that? How do you make people want to stay and grow and learn more in their roles? And I think FP&A now is coming key to how businesses do that. There's a lot more scrutiny, I think, on that, with more from an audit perspective, and with ESG and all these sort of things that are coming through at this moment in time. It makes it a little bit more important that we're not just processing invoices. And how do senior leaders look at their teams now and go, actually, we've got 40 people processing invoices here. How do we make that easier? Because there's opportunities for cost and efficiency savings within all these areas.
Yeah, and I think with the constant scrutiny around cost, right, you've got to look at ways to be more efficient, and be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming years, for sure, because only certain industries, from what I can see, really adopt that approach. But it's quite refreshing to know that someone like yourself leading the finance team, having that outlook, is then obviously as a result that the guys in your team are definitely a bit more forward thinking.
Yeah, I think it's we're a fast moving business. As I say, from a Papa John's perspective, we've grown massively, and we need to be on the pulse of what is happening. What happens if we do X, Y, Z, and where's our risks in certain areas within that to those development plans. So if we don't have a team who is driving that agenda and really looking at how you can maintain costs, how you can make sure that we're getting the right efficiencies from labour in the stores, how can you monitor food costs. Food costs in our business is 25% of our total cost base. So across 110 stores, that's a huge number. That to save 0.5% or 1%, that'll flow straight to the bottom line by understanding how you could better utilise those processes, by looking at the data, by taking the time to fully get into the understanding, supporting the commercial teams in the promotional activities they do, or the new product launches they want to do, to make sure you're getting the best return. Because many of the owners, that's their end goal out here is returns.
So finance is definitely evolving.
Yeah.
As a result, those that are looking for work need to evolve themselves, need to upskill. I think the market is so competitive, especially in this part of the world. What skills do you think those in finance, whether they're at the beginning of their career or whatever stage, what's important skills-wise that they need to really hone in on to remain current and relevant?
Look, I think one, you've got to understand what the technologies are out there. To see what technologies you could go into interview and they're using these. So you've got to be up to date with what kind of technology out there, whether that is RPA, whether that's AI in terms of forecasting tools, and all these things that can really help. And two, you've got to be inquisitive now. You've got to be the one asking the questions and not be stuck behind your desks as a finance person. as a finance guy who is supporting the business, how can you understand how an operational side works if you sit behind your desk? You have got to be really close with those operational teams, whether that's the ops teams in the restaurants, whether that's a marketing perspective, so you understand their thought process. For me, that's the challenge I'm making and want to change in our team, is how do we get you out more to understand the business? Because if you understand the business more, you can add value to the relevant teams and see where issues are. It's asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions and raise queries of why something is being done, because just because it's been done, and I think that's one thing that I would say sometimes is things happen and they just continue in this part of the region for the same thing. It's about challenging the status quo, for want of a better way, of why are we doing something in this way. During my trade meeting, my favourite question is just why. Make people think of why are we doing something like this? What would be the impact of doing this, and so what if we're doing that? What does that mean? What value does that have? So, and if you can think and challenge and be open your mind a little bit, I guess finance can sometimes be seen as the gatekeepers as well as the bean counters. In a very risk-averse type scenario. And sometimes you have to be. I'm not saying that being from a risk-averse is wrong, but you got to be open to the balance of why you might be doing something. Are you doing something to generate brand awareness? Are you doing something to generate cash? Are you doing something to generate profitability? So there's different ways of how, particularly from a marketing and ops perspective, they may be thinking of why they want to make only 1 or 2% from something where finance go, no, our threshold's 5, we're not doing it, or threshold's 10, we're not doing it. But there's no thought of why they might be doing that. So that real understanding of why something is happening, for me, is key to it.
Yeah, and I suppose that inquisitive nature, I imagine during an interview process, you can try and decipher through the individual. Are they asking questions? How can you decipher that maybe in an interview? How do you go about recruiting, and what do you look out for?
For me, it's my key thing is all about cultural fit within our organisation. We're fast moving, so if someone is coming, has got to come and have that energy. And really want to learn and develop, and to be in an organisation has gone from grown humongously over the last 3 or 4 years, but knowing where our plans are going, how can they adapt to that same thing to move even quicker, but with the accuracy, with the conscience that everything's going to be right from an audit, statutory, and all that side of perspective is fully complied with, but to understand and be able to challenge, and you can, I don't know how you can explain that. I guess it's a gut feeling. It's a really hard thing, and maybe my HR team don't like me for having gut feelings about stuff. But, receiving some feedback on an interview, just a gut feeling might be an interesting one. But no, I agree. How it's difficult to really. Culture fit is such a hot topic when recruiting, and it's always, some people I think find the answer culture fit as a bit of a cop-out answer, but I do understand that every business has a certain culture, and you can often gauge just by an interaction with someone, do they or do they don't fit. And I think one of the things I've learned over my last couple of recruitments is actually taking people out of that interview process, if you like, so meeting them in a non-interview, so in a different environment. So I recruited it was a non-finance role, so I have been responsible at leasing, and I actually walked around JBR with the 2 potential leasing candidates to look at what I was telling was locations that we were potentially looking at, and to give me their feedback to see, I was walking up on JBR, an hour and a bit with both persons, so you just get a different relaxed feeling. I had a similar situation, I guess, with the finance candidate we've just done. Meeting outside of the office in a different, just over a coffee and a chat, just to see that different how they react in a more relaxed environment, because everyone knows an interview is not a real life situation. So maybe taking them out of that situation also gives you a little bit of better feel of how they would react when they're put under a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, I do find that interesting when there's been instances, like you say, you take them out in a different environment and you see almost like a different person, and you're like, oh, okay, there's something that happened. Is that not quite right, or of alarm bells? But I suppose it's difficult when you're recruiting, you've got someone in a role. Yeah. How much time can you take of their time if they're working, they've got family, but also you need the decision to be right.
And I think that's one of the problems here. Sometimes you do get these long, drawn out 27 interview processes, which again, I'm not a fan of that process, because I think it's just unfair on the candidate, and if you're going over the same things so many times, I don't see the benefit in some of those. 2 or 3 stages I think is good, as long as they're meeting the right people to help you in that decision making process.
I think you could definitely amalgamate some of the stages, like you say, bring HR in, or I've been involved in some drawn out processes. It can be frustrating for candidates. I think they just lose momentum as well, and I do think that one thing that is really important is how well the recruitment process is run, because I do think that people don't realise that's your first interaction as a candidate. I'm sure you've been in processes where, I don't quite like that, or I've not heard back for a while, and then it puts you off a bit, and you're thinking, maybe this is a sign that this isn't for me.
I'm still waiting to hear I didn't get the job from 4 years ago. That's the truth.
It's crazy, it's definitely not the way that recruitment process should be run, but Anyway, so, I mean, the Papa John's story, a lot of people will be quite familiar with the brand, I'm sure, but quite interesting how that business has evolved for recent years. So it'd be good just to hear a bit about where you were, where you are now, and where you're going.
So I've been in there since 1st of May 2019. So we're 100% owned by a private equity company here. So they previously had 49% and took the remaining 51 in sort of March 19, removed the old owners. And so I came on board as their CFO, and there was literally nothing really at the time, because it was, they had all the head office functions were back outside of Dubai. I had one accountant who sat in the back of one of the restaurants in there. We had one IT guy who went around, and HR, then the ops teams. We had no office. The ERP was about to be switched off. We had no POS system because it was the previous owner's thing. So
you got sold the dream then when you joined.
As I said, it's something I love the challenge, and I knew this going into it, and I had no team. So it was a crazy few months that when I started. It was around Ramadan as well. So we didn't have an office, so I was interviewing in the Kempinski Hotel, in the lobby in the Kempinski Hotel for candidates, for finance, for IT at the time. Walking the streets trying to find being on Dubizzle, trying to find an office space, meeting with POS providers. The CEO at the time was still with his old company, but doing bits, so coming in and out and being involved. So we was in close contact of what was happening. He officially didn't come on board till about the August time, but was always in touch and part of the team as was going forward. So it was about building that team, getting an office, getting the ERP up and running, understanding the data that was being transferred across, because it was quite difficult at the time. So we had 43 trading restaurants at the time, all in the UAE. And with the board coming in, and injections of cash to help us go through that development. So today in the UAE we're 85. So I think I had leasing as well, so I'd done leasing in the past. I had quite a broad remit to do that. So walking the streets, trying to find sites, building up relationships with malls to try and find sites. So opening 10 to 15 new locations a year is what we've done. And we just got everything nice and working, and then COVID hit. We were just turning the corner and we could see some good things. Then obviously COVID hit. And, it was tough. We have quite a lot of dine-in restaurants in malls, and, people couldn't get in petrol stations, so people weren't out and about. So delivery took off. Obviously, with the aggregators, quite challenging to do. But as we came out of that, we saw huge opportunity. Where I think in a period of 3 weeks, we signed 6 new sites. Came out with an opportunity to say, well, actually, we know this is going to turn around, so let's actually get our foot in the door. There was potential, and yes, it might be at the expense of, unfortunately, people who business had failed, and there's malls that were looking to fill spaces. And we took some advantage of some great opportunities to grow. At the same time, because of the work, and our CEO, who's Big Tapan, who was great relationship with Papa John's International, started talking about Saudi Arabia. So that process of a brand new company setup came into play at the same time as well, so towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. So it was all into expansion into Saudi without slowing down the UAE. So Saudi, we're up to 20 locations now in 18 months. And then Jordan came on. So we opened Jordan in February this year. So we opened 4 locations on one day in Jordan, which was really, really good. It's been a great start. I'll open a couple more. So I got 7 in Jordan, 20 in Saudi, 85 here, and we'll continue to open. I think we've got about another 8 to 10 planned for the rest of this year. And then obviously, because of the relationship and the work we've done with some of the things, the opportunity for India came. Obviously, India's a crazy size market, where Papa John's had existed in the past and exited, and so Pizza Hut and Domino's, well, obviously our major competitors, have hundreds of stores already. So it's a huge challenge for us now to develop 650 stores over the next 10 years in India.
That's just India,
and that's just 650 stores in India over the next 10 years, as well as Iraq, where we'll probably end up doing something like 15 to 20 over the next 5 years, as well as continuing our Saudi. Saudi's such a huge F&B market, and we're pretty underrepresented at the moment with 20 stores. So we're targeting to have 250 stores in Saudi over the next 5 to 7 years as well. So we're looking at a business with 1,000+ stores in 5 to 8 years time. So it's always something fun to go on, and we'll never, there's nothing saying that we won't pick up other countries and that during that time as well, as we continue to look and expand and develop. It's a good fun brand. We're not just me, both myself and Tapan and CEO, are very tech driven. So we have AI in our restaurants, checking that the pizzas are as per they should be. It's a standard thing. So it's something we don't. We've looked at the old delivery robots and all these sort of things to make the business different.
It must be difficult to compete. For example, when you go looking at the India growth, right? You've got your 2 big competitors already there. How do you enter that market and stand out and make sure it obviously works out? Is it via differentiating yourself with tech? Like what is the approach? So
I think for India it's a little bit different. It's all around the quality. And we're still, our motto, and we had a huge equity campaign that I think everybody probably saw if you drove down Sheikh Zayed Road, or it was in JLT or on the Sharjah College. She had huge, good on radio. So we did a huge campaigns about our brand quality. That we. Fresh doughs, fresh ingredients, the better quality ingredients, better pizza, and that's what we wanted to get out there, and that's how we've really been pushing the brand over the last 6-7 months to get into that space. So India will be challenging. Obviously, just from a pricing perspective as well, of where Domino's and Pizza Hut sit from that pricing. So a lot of work going on in the backseat from a supply chain perspective. So how do we, find the local suppliers that keep that quality for us. We've done a few blind tested market researches with consumers out there with the support of Papa John's International as well, and we've come out good on all, the taste and the quality is what people wanted. So we've now just got to work on how can we make that happen, and finding the right partners to help us get forward.
Must be quite exciting working for a business with such a clear growth trajectory, because I speak to people and sometimes we're having conversations. I had one recently where a senior individual was a part of a business and there was clearly no plans to grow, and as a result his personal growth was stagnated. It must be quite exciting to know that there's clear growth, you've got the support, and things are going to be moving forward. And
I think it's something that's been great, for everyone in the team as well. We've seen everyone's teams have grown as we've taken on. As Dubai is still like the central office for all these. So, we have small offices in Saudi and a small office in Jordan, but a lot of the work and senior level is in Dubai. So the opportunity for people in the team, whether that's across finance or IT, to get involved and see some of these is also great exposure for them to be involved in different decision making. And they might moan at me that we should have added more people into the team, but that's, we
I agree. You need to add more people.
But it's that exposure they're getting now and seeing how things be, and to be excited about a brand and the place you work, helps you get out of bed in the morning, I think.
It's such an easy sell for candidates, knowing that you can represent a business that's actually clearly looking to grow and actually backs it up. It's not one of those situations, they say they're going to grow and then the reality is they're not. And it's such an easy sell because as an individual, you are going to grow, and everyone wants to be part of something of this journey, don't they?
And it's great that we've been recognised for it as well. So we was at the Papa John's International Conference back in Easter time, and we was recognised for our number of developments. So we was out of the whole Papa John's global, and we was this company that opened the second most stores by 3, beaten by China. So when you think of the size of China as an opportunity compared to little old UAE, it was great recognition. We was recognised as the franchisee of the year by Papa John's as well from an international franchise perspective. So the work that we're doing is being recognised as well, and that's credit to all the teams across the business from an ops perspective, from a marketing, and making sure that we stick by our standards and our quality wherever we go. So the same quality pizza comes in the UAE, comes in Saudi, comes in Jordan. We don't mess about with anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I find quite interesting, and be interesting to hear your take, is private equity owned. People hear stories, they hear about private equity. There's no secret that this part of the world, a lot of money is being invested. There's lots of opportunities here at the minute. From your perspective, how has that been working for private equity owned business, and what is the reality from your side?
Well, it was my first taste of private equity as well to come in. It was something that I think had sort of been on my list that I wanted to do, whether I was in the UK and looked, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about I didn't have it, so I was never allowed to go work for a company.
I'm okay to learn. I want to get the opportunity, but people don't want to give that a lot of time, do they?
And now I've been lucky to come in and be involved with Levant. The guy, so they're data driven, and this comes back to part of probably the reason why they're data driven. They want to understand where the numbers are, where the business is going. They want to understand where the opportunities are, how we're improving that bottom line returns. At the end of the day, their long term goal is to exit from that and sell that on and do it. So it's got to be our goal as well to make sure that we as a business are delivering the best we can. And going back to then from a finance perspective, how do we make sure that they're adding the right value? How do we make sure we're doing the right decisions?
And I imagine, like you say, that if that data and that FP&A and the analysis and everything we've mentioned isn't in place, you probably have quite a tough time feeding to those senior individuals and giving them the data, because you probably don't have access to it.
And when we come to an exit, when there's a due diligence process, we've got to understand everything that has happened. How keeping track and understanding and explaining someone through a due diligence process, different bits is key. So understanding what's happened, why, putting together those long-term forecasts and long-term plans of where we're going, and making sure that they're at a place that you're then achieving them on a year-on-year basis. That's where it becomes hard to understand and add that value to make sure that from a team perspective we're doing everything we can to understand how we get better, and that's been one of this year's mantras. To get better. How do we get better?
Yes, it's clear that for you and Papa John's business, you've got a clear next few years ahead of you. You know where you're going. I think that's really important for people to know that that's the journey you're on, and now you can just work towards that. So
it won't be smooth. It goes ups and downs, but I think that's the excitement. I don't ever feel like it's going to be the same day. Twice in a week. Never mind. The morning and the afternoon are different. There's always something that we need to think about. I'm someone who likes to just keep challenging, seeing what's going on. How can we make something a little bit better? How can we make something a little bit easier? How do we communicate better with the teams? And so it's still an evolving. We're not, from a finance team, we're nowhere near perfect, but it's how can we get closer? We're a small team, compared to some of the organisations out here in the bigger brands. In these, we're a very small team, and we work hard, but we make sure we have some good fun doing it.
Good. It was very, very interesting for sure. We've got a few quick fire questions. Okay. Obviously, that's the default of every podcast. So, your favourite restaurant in Dubai? What would that be?
Besides my local Papa John's, you mean?
Obviously, Papa John's is number one.
I'm a big sushi Japanese fan. So, yeah.
Anywhere in particular, or are you going super high end where you pay a fortune and you're starving, or what are you going for? Yo Sushi? What are you going for?
Yo Sushi was my old brands. I used to love Yo Sushi, so my old company was Yo Sushi. So, maybe I'm not quite into a Boca and things like that, but it's something I just like to try different places now and again.
Sushi, I imagine, because I know you get pizza, don't you, in the office every week, and you probably get amazing discount codes. So I'll have a word with you offline about that.
We do great corporate discount deals if you want to order your lunches.
Yeah, lovely. I'll speak to Connor about that for sure. Your favourite way to spend your weekend?
So my weekend is normally taxi service. Yeah. Taking my son James to football, to golf, to that. As you mentioned earlier, I do try and play a bit of golf.
I think you're underselling yourself, because rumours are your handicap's 18, is it?
That's very true, yeah.
But I've heard that you play much better than that. I think you're underselling yourself.
Inconsistency, I think, is where it is. As I tried to explain to the guys on Saturday, it's inconsistency. But no, I like to get out and be quite active. I think and see what's about. We've been here a long time, so in the past you're going so much to see and do here. But I think you sort of tick them off. Start ticking them off and going back and finding that. It's a bit hot to go sit on the beach at the moment, but the weather's
going to start getting good soon, so I'm told. Still pretty warm in a minute.
Yeah, it's still pretty warm.
What about your favourite country you visited?
Well, two, I guess. I love Sri Lanka.
Really? Yeah. I went this year, to be fair. It was good.
Yeah, we've been as a family a few times. The different parts, the food is fantastic. The people so friendly. There's so much great culture and stuff to see out there. When we did a train ride up from Colombo up to Kandy, which was up through the mountains was perfect. Sit on the beaches and go whale watching and things like that in a right way. And I love to dive.
Oh, really?
And James did his open water when we was out in the Maldives last year. So it was great actually taking him, going diving, just me and him together off the boat was something.
It's a surreal experience diving.
I loved it. It's one of those things that you just feels in a different world. Sat watching these two manta rays just feeding for 20 minutes was just, really, really nice, relaxing, awe-inspiring way to spend an hour under the water.
Yeah, sounds good. And what would you be if you wasn't a CFO?
God. Probably a professional golfer with everything that I was talking about at the moment.
Is that realistic? Come on.
No. I could have been if I was been younger and carried on practicing, but I don't know. I actually fell into accountancy as well. It was one of those things that I fell into.
Yeah. What, you didn't grow up wanting to be an accountant?
No, unfortunately not. It was one of those things that you just happened to be.
Yeah.
I loved playing sport, and I used to play a bit of rugby, semi-professionally type stuff. So I think I'd love to have been involved in sport in somehow.
Some way, yeah.
I've done a bit of coaching when I was as well from that. So it's that sort of bits I'd love to try and maybe do something like that.
Something in sport.
Yeah.
Either a professional sportsman of some kind or coach or
coaching,
something sports related.
Just something like that. I love that active side to keep out and go, and it's not always easy here with the weather and the temperatures, but it's still good fun.
Agreed. So thank you for coming. It's been really insightful. We have got a gift here for you, which you may have seen. So there's a few bits in there. So we'll give that to you without hitting the microphone. So we hope the podcast has provided you with some useful tips and advice. So we'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks, Darell.
Thank you.